Hello everyone, welcome to this event on the basics of online mediation. I'm going to be your host today. My name's Phoebe. I'm going to start by just telling you a little bit about MediateGuru, as some of you may not have attended our events before. MediateGuru is a social initiative led by members across the globe, and our aim is to bridge the gap between the public and litigation. We're creating a social awareness campaign showcasing mediation as the future, and we have conducted various successful online webinars and events with speakers all across the globe. We have a reach in more than 60 countries, and we aim to provide you the best lecture series so that you can add value to your legal studies and your legal career. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our amazing speaker for today, Ms. Suzanne Guthrie. Suzanne is recognized as one of the top family law and mediation attorneys in the United States, and she's been helping families and couples to navigate separation and divorce for the last 30 years. 2 years ago, she also founded her own company, which trains colleagues and professionals on how to mediate online. So the practical and ethical considerations involved in this. She offers more than 7 programs for professionals, all aimed at increasing their mental toolbox, their legal skills, and taking their mediation career to new heights. Suzanne is an award-winning podcast host. A couple of years ago, she founded the podcast The Divorce and Beyond, and she's reached an audience of almost 4 million people, which is impressive. She's also been featured in multiple media outlets such as CNBC, Market Watch, Forbes, Ion Chicago, and many others. And she's honored to serve on the Executive Bar Council of the American Bar Association's section on dispute resolution. And she is also co-chair of the Mediation Committee and Advanced Mediation Skills Institute. So thank you very much, Suzanne, for coming to speak to us today. Before I hand over, I would like to remind you all that you can leave your comments and questions in the chat box below. So without further ado, I'm now going to hand over to Suzanne, and you will hear from me again later when I take your questions.
Hello, everyone. Good evening to, I believe, most of you. For me, it is morning, but I am absolutely delighted to be here with you all. This is very exciting for me. I have been an online mediation professional for, as Phoebe mentioned, for a few years. So I get very excited about online mediation, and I'm thrilled to see so many of you here to hear about the topic. I would like to thank MediateGuru for putting this together, for inviting me to speak to you. I really am passionate about bringing awareness of the benefits of mediating online, the access to justice, and the many ways that moving to an online platform can help people. So this is really a wonderful experience. And thank you, Phoebe, for that wonderful introduction. I appreciate that recitation. I always get a little embarrassed sitting there listening to that. But I just wanted to mention, as you see, there is a poll. I would really appreciate if you just take one moment to answer the questions there, mainly because it helps me inform you. I know who I'm speaking to, and I can sort of tailor some of my information to be as helpful as possible to you, because that's really my goal with any presentation that I'm doing. I'm really wanting to bring to you those facts, that information that's going to help you be comfortable moving into the online sector if you're choosing to provide dispute resolution services through an online platform. So I see we have a large number of students out there, and that makes me very happy. I'm actually doing a presentation for later this week or next week for the University of Southern California, and I do presentations for law schools all the time. That's one of my favorite things to do. So let's pull up my slide deck here, and we'll be able to get started. Again, thanking MediateGuru and all of you for being here. The other thing that Phoebe did mention, but one of my other favorite things to do is answer your questions. So please do, put your questions in the chat on the side. Phoebe is going to be going through them as we go along. We'll have a couple of spots where we're going to stop and see what I can answer for you all. So I do want to give you a little background on my journey to becoming an online professional, because it may sound familiar to many of you who are who are legal practitioners, not just family law practitioners. But I've been a family law attorney for almost 31 years. I'm just coming up on my 31st year, which makes me feel quite old. But for the first 25 years of my practice, I had what I would consider a pretty traditional practice. It may sound familiar to those of you who are legal professionals or other professionals. I worked out of a brick and mortar office. I met my clients in my office, and I went to a brick and mortar courthouse to ply my trade. And then 5 years ago, I moved from one side of the United States to the other. I went from Connecticut and New York to California. And because I was not licensed yet to practice law in California, they make you go through the licensing process in California, no matter how old you are and how long you've been practicing. It quickly became apparent to me that if I wanted to continue to earn a living, to ply my trade, to be an attorney, to be a mediator, I was going to need to find a way to work with people back on the East Coast of the United States. And that's when I looked online. There wasn't a lot of information. And so I just decided to try and figure out how to use video conferencing and other, online platforms to be able to work with people on the East Coast. And I did. I just started to, I'll say, to use a little bit of slang, but I started to wing it. I just jumped on and started working with clients, and quickly learned that there's more to it than just video conferencing. In order to do it well, and to do it ethically, and to do it competently, there was a learning curve. But once I got over that learning curve, I quickly found that providing services online had a large number of benefits, not only for my clients who seemed to love it, but it also had a lot of benefits for me. And so I really put a great deal of effort into it and found it to be a very successful paradigm for my practice. And within a couple of years, my colleagues started to notice that I was really enjoying what I was doing, that it seemed to be successful for me. And so they started to reach out and ask me how I was doing it. How are you, accomplishing this? And that's when I founded Learn to Mediate Online, which is my separate arm, which is a training platform. Most of my programs now are available on demand. You can find them on the website, and they start with my original program, which is the Learn to Mediate Online training program, which is a 3-hour program that transitions professionals from a brick and mortar office to what they need to know to mediate online. And I would say in the beginning that was moderately successful. People wanted to know, but online mediation was really still sort of an outlier. And no matter how many times I told people about how great it was, it still remained as that outlier. And then COVID happened and the pandemic. And about 6 months ago, my training practice just exploded. And since COVID has started, I'm coming up on about 17,000 professionals have benefited from taking the Learn to Mediate Online program. I have presented around the world and continue to do so right now and as I go forward. And that's very exciting for me because we've gone from online mediation being an outlier to online mediation right now, I think, being the norm for dispute resolution practitioners. Definitely in the United States, as I talk to colleagues, and I am on the executive council of the dispute resolution section of the American Bar Association, and as I talk to my colleagues, this is how we are providing services to our clients. And, so that is something that for me, I think will be continuing long beyond the pandemic and the social distancing that we are living through right now. So I do like to review some of these benefits because as I'm talking to professionals, one of the things that I note is that some people think, well, once we get past COVID, this will all go away. People are going to go back to their offices and this whole online phenomena will go away. But I don't believe that to be true. And it's not what I'm hearing from my colleagues who have embraced the online practice. And that is because the benefits go far beyond social distancing. I think it's important for us all to know these as we're considering how we as professionals, if you as students go into a dispute resolution practice or offer dispute resolution services to clients, it's important to know that online services very well may be something you want to offer, even if you are doing it in line as well or in person as well. So obviously convenience. I think the first point here is the most obvious beyond the social distancing. It is, inordinately more convenient to be able to conduct these proceedings online. People do not have to travel. People do not have to sit in traffic, which, in the United States is a major issue. Nobody has to plan extra time to get to your office. Nobody has to fly in for an international or multi-state matter. The more people you have, the easier it is to schedule these things. You no longer have people having to have large blocks of their time or entire days or days at a time to schedule because they only need to be able to log on. So really the participants can be almost anywhere. There are some limitations, certainly a Wi-Fi connection or an internet connection is one of them. There are some other ethical considerations on where people are located that we'll get into. Another very important aspect of online mediation, and this is for both the participants, our clients, as well as us as practitioners to be aware of, is that it is much more comfortable and supportive for our clients to go through the conflict resolution process in the comfort and support of their own home or other well-known environment to them. They're not sitting in some stranger's conference room, some lawyer's office, at some big round table, which in a very formal atmosphere to go through this proceeding. In fact, I am a family law attorney and mediator. Most of my clients, and certainly during COVID, most people are in their home. which is a place of comfort for them. So if you can consider people going through dispute resolution, conflict resolution processes, it is much more comfortable for them to be sitting in their home. They're much more capable of regulating their emotions, which for us as professionals gives us much more ready to, our clients who are much more ready to reach resolution. They are not battling with their emotions, which can make people behave unreasonably, which can make it hard for them to process information. So it is really a much more conducive atmosphere if they can be online. It is safer for all participants, and that does go beyond COVID, but includes that, right? We're all available from the safety of our homes, but that does go to domestic violence situations where we can have a victim and a perpetrator in separate locations. In a family situation, that is can be very important. High conflict situations. I mean, conflict resolution by its very nature is difficult, and to be able to keep the participants apart is much better for everyone and much safer. It is disability compatible. So as an access to justice for people with disabilities, being able to access dispute resolution is really important. I have had clients who are paraplegics, quadriplegics, who are deaf, all kinds of disabilities can be accommodated by going online. And that has been significant for people where they may not have used dispute resolution services because of the difficulties of going to a dispute resolution professional's offices. So that's another benefit. It also, for us as professionals, has a few significant, what I would call financial benefits. One is that it expands our client base. We are able to now work with people over a much larger geographic area. In my original practice, when I was a brick and mortar attorney and mediator, I worked with clients almost solely who were within a certain mile radius of my offices. The minute I went online, I was able to expand my client base to the entire state, entire jurisdiction in which I was licensed, which significantly, with a large state like California, immediately expanded my practice and brought more clients to my online door. In addition, it quickly became apparent to me that I could add to my service offerings what I could do for people. So going beyond just legal services and dispute resolution services, I now offer coaching services. I now am an expert consultant on other legal or mediation cases. I co-mediate cases around the world as an expert on certain family law issues. I do a lot of high conflict and a lot of ultra high net worth cases. So that's allowed me to exponentially expand what I do, allowing me to have more potential cases brought to me, and allows me to be more particular about the cases I take and charge a higher rate because I have a great deal more cases to choose from. The other aspect that has, so as that has gone up, the amount that I can charge and the number of cases available to me, potential clients, my overhead has gone down. So I am fully online. In fact, I went fully online more than 2 years ago. I do not have a brick and mortar office. Will never, and before COVID ever happened, it was never in my business plan to ever go back to having an office, and I certainly will not at this point. So my overhead, my cost to do business is really the cost of my programs, which in US dollars is under $100 per month, which, having gone from a very high rent on my office space when I had my own law firm, and my payroll and my utilities and all of the expenses that I had of running a law firm, that is just a huge, significant savings. So frankly, to be honest, my income has gone up greatly since I've become an online professional, which I know is a concern for those of you who are out there as professionals, but something to be aware of, even if you're a student and considering an online practice. Now, that is not to say that there are not some significant challenges or some major challenges that you need to be aware of as you go into an online practice. Thank you for moving my little picture around. I love this webinar jam platform. I have to say, I've presented on a number of platforms. This one is really very easy to work with. So I applaud you for using it. I want to go over those challenges because this is also, just as it's great to know about the benefits, you also need to be aware of the challenges, and because that's what gives you the ability to meet those challenges. So I believe for dispute resolution professionals, the fact that our participants' environment is out of our control, meaning they are somewhere completely remote from us, where we have no ability to know who's in the room, who's with them, what they're doing out in the room that they're in, because it could be clear across the world, as you all are. This can lead to issues with privacy and confidentiality. There are other issues, but for mediation professionals, dispute resolution professionals, those are the two big keywords, right? Those are two major hallmarks of dispute resolution. So they need to be protected. There will need to be precautions taken. And we'll talk about that in this presentation. And then for many professionals, depending on where people are on their comfort level with technology, the tech proficiency can be an impediment for many. As I started training professionals at the advent of COVID 6 months ago, the overriding emotion of many of the participants in my training sessions was fear. I had many very, very accomplished professionals who had been mediating and arbitrating and litigating for years and years, and who had accolades, across the board, who suddenly were in, fear of losing their livelihood because they could no longer be in their office with their clients, be in a mediation room or an arbitration room, be in a courtroom. And so this online lifeline of going online, of practicing online, became a lifeline for them, but there was also a great deal of fear around becoming proficient in the technology. And it is very important, if you are going to go online, that you have proficiency in the technology. For most younger practitioners, that's not as big an issue, but across the board, we all need to become tech proficient. Now, that goes to a variety of different issues, and I always cover equipment and setup. And many of you may think, well, this is, everybody knows what we need to have for equipment and setup to do video conferencing, and that very well may be true. But for online mediation or online dispute resolution, there are some considerations that I want to highlight. So let me just go through this list here because some of these things may or may not be obvious. So I do, if you're going to conduct online mediations, if you are going to be an online practitioner, you need to be operating, for the most part, from a laptop or a desktop computer. We all love our tablets, we all love our phones, but they are not well suited to conducting your online mediations, to your dispute resolution. A laptop or desktop computer, the programming, most of the programs that we would use, and I'll go over many of the platforms that are available. Zoom, I will say, has been by far the #1 platform that people have pivoted to. And in fact, it's what I've used for most of my 5 years online. And it operates, to be specific to Zoom, it operates better on a laptop or desktop computer. In fact, one of the main components or functionality of Zoom that makes it so conducive to mediation is the breakout rooms, and they're not available on iOS devices. So you need to be on a laptop or desktop computer. And by far, the most important aspect of being an online practitioner, and it's not just for the practitioner, it's for every participant, is that everyone have a strong internet connection. And I can't tell you how many times I have logged on and been a participant in an online mediation where this has not been the case. And the most disruptive thing that is going to happen in your online process is someone's screen freezing, someone's audio going all crazy or freezing or being distorted because someone does not have a strong internet connection. So this is something that needs to be transmitted to people, and you as the practitioner need to take into consideration early on. Most people will go and have either an Ethernet connection put in or contact their provider to get the highest level of Wi-Fi signal available, and that's what I've done. You also want to have some, additional capabilities. You need, I always just say, a large screen makes it easier. As you add people to a video conference, each thumbnail video gets smaller and smaller. And one of the things that is very important to understand about online mediation is that it is a wonderful platform, video conferencing, wonderful platform for communication. People worry that you are going to lose the personal touch, you're going to have less understanding of the communication from the parties because you're only seeing them from the shoulders up. And frankly, I've not found that to be true, and most of my colleagues who report to me also find it not to be true. And that is because 55% of our communication is in our facial expressions, right? It's in what we see from the chin up. And a video conferencing platform is perfect for that type of communication because it's so focused on the face. The other 35 or another 35% is the inflection in our tone. Only 7% or so is the actual words we say. So if you think about it, video conferencing for that 55% of visual in our facial expression and 35% audible in the inflection in our tone, video conferencing is wonderful for that type of communication. But to that point, you need to have a good microphone so you have good audio. You need to have a good camera so you have good video. And I always suggest headphones because any background noise, either in your background or in your participant's background, is going to distort the audio. And those are really so vitally important so that the mediator and the participants have that high level of communication. Now, I always talk about the background that you're going to have because you do want to have a generally professional or neutral background if you're going to be putting on an online mediation. And this goes to several things. One, we are putting on a professional proceeding, right? We are the mediator, we are the arbitrator, we are the professional in the room who's being paid for services. I have logged on and seen many colleagues, unmade beds, piles of laundry, dirty dishes in the sink, kids watching television. All of that is not really appropriate for a professional setting. In addition, we don't want our background as professionals as we go into this conflict resolution process. We don't want our environment to intrude on the process. So you want to keep it neutral. You don't want to have a very busy background. I know a lot of us like to put our diplomas on the wall, and for a long time I had all my books and awards and all those things back there. We're so used to, as professionals, putting our accolades out there for others to see. That's actually very distracting during the mediation process, during the dispute resolution process. You want to stay neutral. You want to keep your colors neutral. You want to keep everything so that you are and your environment are not intruding on the process. In addition, with Zoom fatigue, which maybe you've heard of, I know it's a big buzzword, it's real. Zoom fatigue or video conferencing fatigue is very real. I can tell you, as someone who is online 10 to 15 hours a day, I don't move from this chair, but I am exhausted by the time I get up. And part of what contributes to that, there are many factors, but part of what contributes to that is when you are in meetings with many people who are participating and they all have these very busy backgrounds, our brain just gets tired processing all of that background. So another option is a virtual background. I can't show that on this particular platform, but many of the video conferencing platforms allow for that. And you just want to pick something neutral. Now, appearance, we've gone into why it's important to be able to see everyone clearly. And that goes to, the camera position right in front, so it looks like you're having eye contact with everyone. That's why I use an external camera. But you also need to have good lighting. And that's why I have this picture. For those of you who are younger, you may not recognize this picture, but this is a picture from the Watergate hearings here in the United States. This is one of the central characters who was an individual nicknamed Deep Throat because he had a gravelly voice and he was always shown in shadow, and he testified and brought, was a whistleblower in this particular case. So this is a rather famous photo from the Watergate era. Those older people like me recognize this. But the issue here is his identity was protected because they had the strong lighting from behind. And that goes to how I see so many professionals signing on for their proceedings these days with a nice bright window behind them that shows their beautiful outside in a nice sunny day, and they have no lighting in front of them. And that's how you end up in shadow like this. And as we've talked about, right, it's very important that people be able to see your face and that you be able to see the expression on the face of those you are mediating for. So you cannot have this lighting situation. You need to have good lighting, throwing light on everyone's face, good camera position. Everyone's going to be visible from the shoulders up. And we all do need to get used to being on screen. I think most of us have gotten there, but for some mediators, some professionals, that can be distracting. So at this point, I just thought I'd take a quick break, Phoebe, and see if there are any questions that anyone has so far.
Okay, thank you, Susan. We do have quite a lot of questions, actually.
Love that.
So my first one is, what are some of the more challenging factors behind online mediation specifically? And also, how do you ensure that both parties are balanced in an online mediation?
Those are both great questions. So the first one, some of the biggest challenges, I would say, come before the mediation process even starts. I have found that online mediation or a successful online dispute resolution proceeding is really it goes well if there's a lot of preparation. It's all in the pre-mediation setup. And that goes mainly to not only preparing ourselves as the professionals, doing all those things, the setup I just talked about, having the good internet connection, the lighting, all those things, but it also goes to educating your participants on all of that. Because as I said earlier, if they don't have good lighting, if they don't have a good setup, if they don't know how to use the platform, all those things are going to inhibit the process. And the more familiar everyone is with what it's going to look like, how it's going to proceed, the better everyone and the better the actual mediation will go. So I often, and I recommend doing pre-mediation onboarding with the participants. And what I do is if I have attorneys participating in my mediation, I will do a pre-mediation walkthrough of the platform with them. I send them guidelines and ground rules ahead of time, telling them all of the information that's basically in this presentation. So what we've talked about now, but even more, and make sure they send that to their clients and educate their clients. I also will do pre-mediation meetings in this format or in the format of the mediation with the clients so that they have a chance to meet me, get comfortable. You can start to establish the rapport and really get to start being acquainted with their issues. You can get into that. So those are two important steps not to skip over in an online proceeding. Some people I know skip over those or don't go into those with an in-person. Really important in an online proceeding. And then that balance question is also a fantastic question. And I actually just dealt with this the other day, where I was doing a mediation where I had one party who came to the mediation with their attorney, the attorney's associate attorney, they had the therapist, and I believe they had a forensic financial specialist. So they had this big group on one side, and then the other party was there by themselves. And just, think about the visuals of that. One side is all these pictures on a screen. The other side is just the single person. So one of the things that can help in that situation is, one, turning off the video for the non-essential parties, and also being able to put them in the separate breakout room so that it's not so apparent. You do end up doing that shuttle diplomacy, and we'll talk about that, where the mediator has to go back and forth. But that's how many mediations proceed anyway. Not so much in family mediations, but I know if you are a mediator out there, you're probably working in that format in a lot of instances anyway.
Okay, thank you, Susan.
Absolutely.
We do have a couple more,
Sure.
if you'd like to take them now.
Of course.
So another one is obviously building trust is very important in all kinds of mediations. So some people are asking, is it harder to build that trust and to form that connection with clients when you're doing online mediation?
That is the number one question that I get. I get that in every presentation I do, and I'm glad that you have asked that question. And this goes to, I will tell you the initial answer is no, I have not found that. In fact, I have found that I am just as able to establish rapport, exhibit empathy, and work with my clients. I'm dealing with people who are going through divorce, very emotional proceedings for people. But some of the key components to that go back to everything we just talked about. If they can't see your face and you can't see their face, emotion doesn't travel as well through a screen. So if you're sitting in a room and someone's crying or someone is upset, it's easy to see. We can see that. If someone's a very tiny picture, as you can see, or they've got their camera in a bad place and all you can see is the top of their head, or all of the setup has a lot to do with that. And the other thing is, I have a colleague who's a psychologist, and she's done quite a bit of research into this. And what she suggests when it comes to dealing with the emotions online is, if you can't do what you would do in person, like if you might have reached out to pat someone's hand when they're upset and say, I can see this truly upsets you, Mary. You can say, Mary, if we were in person, I'd reach out and pat your hand or touch your hand here, because I can really see that this is upsetting for you, and I understand that. And again, in the inflection in your tone and the lean in and the moving of your hand, I think people get those emotions through. You need to be a little more verbally demonstrative of what you would do, but hopefully that just showed you that you can still go through the screen and be there with your clients, be there with your participants, and you can get the same thing. In fact, some of the emotion comes through a little too strongly. As people get angry or get into the screen, you'd be surprised. I have jumped back from a screen at times as people's fingers are pointing at me and things like that. So it's all just that taking the time and the eye contact. I can't tell you, you have to have your screen, you have to have your camera in front of you like you do, Phoebe, right? So that it looks like you are looking into the eyes of your participants. It's very important. If you're doing this, I have a colleague who has two screens and she's always looking this way. So if I'm looking over here where my camera is, a major portion of the, well, I'm looking at the camera, so let me look this way, right? A major portion of the emotional content just evaporates. Because if I'm not looking into your eyes, you don't get that same feeling.
Okay, thank you. That's a really good answer. That's really
Absolutely.
informative and clear. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I will let you continue now.
Okay, perfect. So we'll jump into now some of the actual practical platform requirements, because this is where I think people really need to just put some thought in. And again, for me, online mediation is all about the preparation. And one thing I just want to say, I don't know what platform, I think in the polls, let me just go to, so Zoom is for video conferencing platform, what's your go-to? 47% of you have said that's Zoom. So that's consistent. In fact, I did a poll of the 16,000 or so people who have taken my online mediation program. 94% of them said they're using Zoom. So what's the next largest for you all is Google Meet. And then the others are all under 10%. So that would be very consistent, right? Everybody, for the most part, jumped to Zoom. But I want to let you know, it's more than Zoom. We need to have more proficiency, and it may require, if you decide to be an online practitioner in mediation, you may need to know more than one platform. And that's for a variety of different reasons. Many large companies, insurance companies, if you're doing that type of litigation mediation, a lot of companies are not allowing their employees, their people, to use Zoom because of those initial issues and fears around Zoom security. I will tell you, I was just on a panel with the global CIO of Zoom just 2 days ago, Harry Mosley, and they've instituted over 150 security upgrades since the advent of Zoom, of COVID. I have used Zoom for 5 years. I've never had a security issue with one of my mediations, but it is an issue for some companies, and we as professionals have to deal with that. In addition, there are other platforms, and in some ways, some of the others are better. So here are some of those other platforms, and we've talked about some of them, and you've indicated some of you are using them. The ones over here, WebEx, GoToMeeting, BlueJeans, Zoom, and Skype. Those are all broad meeting platforms, right? They're for any type of meeting, and so people are doing happy hours, people are having baby showers, people are doing their board meetings, and people are doing dispute resolution on those types of platforms. But they were built for all kinds of meetings. So they're not specific to dispute resolution. Again, in my practice, Zoom has worked best for dispute resolution, and that's because they do have certain functionality that works for us. But I do want to bring your attention to Legaler, RDO, which is Resolve Disputes Online, Modron, and Crack, just to name a few. These are platforms that are created by dispute resolution professionals for dispute resolution professionals. So they've always had security as a major issue, and they have a lot of great functionality and additional functionality in their platforms that makes them great for us as dispute resolution professionals. I personally use Zoom, Legaler, and Modron, and I'm starting to add RDO right now to my repertoire of options that I can offer to my clients. And I, know that each one has some certain different things that make them better for certain types of proceedings. So I do encourage you to not only be aware of these, but become proficient in more than one. And if you are the practitioner, perhaps consider offering more than one to your clients. Now, some of the functionality that I think is important in a meeting, in a video conferencing platform, is there. I'm going to go through a few of them here. I think you need to have meeting setup that allows for the security concerns that we have as professionals in a mediation where confidentiality and privacy are so paramount. One of those is that waiting room function. And this is another thing that makes Zoom so critically, important and easy to use for us as dispute resolution professionals, is that you can vet the people in the waiting room before you allow them in as the host into the meeting. So that is a very important functionality. In addition, the screen sharing so that you can show documents, so that you can use the whiteboard to take notes, since we can't use our nice legal pads that we love to use unless we want to hold them up to the screen like this. I also always am hooking up my iPad Pro, because I can use that to take notes as a whiteboard, etc. That's critically important, that you have screen sharing. And then the holy grail for mediators, or most mediators, is the ability to caucus, which in Zoom you can do using either the waiting room function, or if you're doing quite a bit of caucusing or the entire process as in caucus, you'll probably find that the breakout rooms are the better function. So the other thing to consider beyond your video conferencing is that you may need other programs in order to mediate online, right? Video conferencing is important because you need to see everyone, you need to have all your participants there, but there are other things that you will do in your online mediations that you won't be able to do because people aren't in the room with you anymore, right? There's no one around your conference table to hand you a document. There's no one around the table with pen in hand to sign the settlement agreement. And there's no one there, importantly, as professionals, we want to get paid. There's no one there to hand you a credit card to pay for your services. So you need to look into some other programs and considerations and have them set up and have the functionality to do all of these things. And that can, that's all these different possibilities. There's e-signature platforms like DocuSign, Write Signature, Adobe Sign. If we're lucky enough to get an agreement, we want to be able to draft that up and get everyone's signature on it. So how are you going to do that? Think about that ahead of time. I will tell you that Legaler and Modron either both have e-signatures in their platform already or are about to add that as functionality. And I think that's another reason to know about these other platforms that I referenced earlier. You also need to be able to have all of your documents online as e-documents, right? Easily accessible, because if you're going to share the screen and you want to show pleadings or you want to show the agreement that you're drafting, you have to be able to share the screen, pull those things up from a secure location and send things back and forth between the participants in a secure manner. Now, I happen to use Dropbox because I've used it in my legal, career for years, but there's Google Drive, Box, OneDrive. I'm sure you all have things out there that you're using because as legal professionals or as dispute resolution professionals, we know we really generally cannot just attach private and secure documents to an email. It's not a secure way to send these things. And then we want to be able to get paid, and we want that as professionals to be as easy for our participants as possible. Don't make it hard to get paid. So you want to make sure you have PayPal or LawPay or Stripe, or one of the payment, Square is another one. That's what I use, Square or PayPal. You want to make sure you have that functionality easily accessible for your participants as well. Now, meeting security is really of the utmost importance. In fact, it's always been as part of Zoom a possibility. As I said, in 5 years, I've never had an issue with meeting security. But when the COVID started, so many people jumped on Zoom, were incorrectly setting up their meetings or not properly securing their meetings. And that led to Zoom bombing and all other, unwanted people showing up in private and confidential proceedings. So, you want to be able to lock your meeting after people have entered. If you can, use a password to get into the meeting. You need to tell people to safeguard their sign-on information. Zoom bombing was greatly a function of people posting their Zoom sign-on links on LinkedIn and other social media sites. That's not generally a good, secure way to keep your meeting secure. That waiting room process that I talked about that Zoom has and many of the other platforms have either added or have, that's one of the most critical to me. That's how I think I have never had an issue with one of my mediations. And just as a safety measure, using that virtual or nondescript background with no identifiers in the background also just adds an extra layer of meeting security if your location needs to be private. Now, for mediators, confidentiality and privacy are, our biggest buzzwords. They are two of the hallmarks of a mediation proceeding, and one of the biggest areas of concern for us as professionals in an online platform. So I want to talk about confidentiality first, because confidentiality is a legal issue. It is an evidentiary exclusion or a privilege, depending on the laws of your jurisdiction. In the US, in most jurisdictions, it exists as an evidentiary exclusion, meaning that what happens in a mediation proceeding cannot be admitted into an after judicial proceeding. In most of our jurisdictions, in some jurisdictions, it's privileged. It's like attorney-client privileged communication. In some jurisdictions, notably in the United States, in New York and Wyoming, we have a couple of states where it's not as prized, this mediation confidentiality. And so we do need to be aware that if we have participants participating from locations where the evidentiary exclusion or the privilege is not held as high or does not have as high a bar, there may be instances where we cannot ensure confidentiality. And in fact, that has happened in a very few cases. Something to be aware of, something we need to look into as professionals and make the participants aware of. Now, privacy is a hallmark of mediation. Privacy is why people choose to mediate rather than to litigate in many cases. They don't want their dirty laundry being aired in that public forum. So they choose to mediate. Now, what that means is that because people are online, and we've talked about that fact that their environment is now out of our control, we worry that the privacy of the proceeding is vulnerable. And in fact, it can be. I will point out that it is also vulnerable in person. So since the advent of the cell phone in our world, it has always been possible for people, even in your conference room, in a mediation proceeding, to record on this, both audio and or video, as well as to call someone, open up a phone line, and put it down on the table. So I do want you all to be aware that it's something of an illusion that we have ultimate privacy and control in an in-person, but online, definitely there are vulnerabilities. So this is where we as the professionals need to make some rules. We need to make the rules. We need to communicate them to the participants. I do that in writing. I educate them on why this is important to their process, and I make them mandatory. And they involve no third parties who are not a part of the mediation process can be present. There can be no eavesdroppers. And by eavesdroppers, I don't mean just intentional people listening in. I mean anyone within earshot who's overhearing a private and confidential proceeding. Everyone needs to be on secure Wi-Fi. I have had people go to a Starbucks and sign on through their public Wi-Fi to do their divorce mediation. That is not private and secure and confidential. And I always tell people that there is no recording. And you can see I've highlighted that and bolded it. as I just mentioned, they've always had the capability with their cell phone, but it's important to tell them and put it in writing and make that mandatory. Now, a few additional tips if you're going to mediate online. I always tell people to create an interruption-free zone for the time that they're going to be in the proceeding, just because once they're in their home or their office, you don't want people dropping in. You don't want them, with the kids running around. We ask them to take reasonable measures. I also tell them to take a technology hiatus while they are actively participating so that they're not on their phone, because remember, they're on their computer or their phone or their tablet. You don't want them posting on their social media, answering emails, or doing 15 other things, which we just tend to do without even thinking. Always have them log on early. I do 5 minutes when I'm just doing a 2-party mediation, up to 15, maybe even more for multi-party mediations. You can deal with whatever tech issues are going to happen with sign-on in that amount of time, and it keeps everybody's blood pressure down when the mediation starts on time. And then definitely tell them about respectful and effective online communication. For the most part, that goes to don't interrupt, because when you interrupt online, it's not just rude. It usually will mean your audio won't be picked up by the video conferencing platform. In addition, if you're a hand talker, like you've probably noticed I am, you can't be a hand talker down here. You just look like you're shaking. You need to tell people it's wonderful to be expressive. Use your hands, adds to the body language, adds to the communication, but it needs to be up here. And I do also tell people about that, the thing coming through the screen, the emotion coming through the screen, so that they're aware of that, because I have people get very upset and just get right into the screen, get into their camera, and it can be upsetting for everyone involved. The lifesaver, if you do nothing else, make sure you have a protocol in place that you communicate to everyone who's in the proceeding about what to do if their tech fails. And I will tell you this because sooner or later, the tech will fail. I have had everything go wrong that could go wrong for both myself and my participants, and I keep it as super simple as I possibly can. That's KISS, keep it super simple. I put it in writing and I tell them all, try to sign on again. That's pretty simple. And if that doesn't work, call or text me on my cell phone. And at the beginning of every mediation, I remind everyone what my cell phone number is, and I get all their cell phone numbers if I don't already have them. And the biggest one, you stay calm. As the professional, we need to stay calm, because if we panic, trust me, they will panic. And we are the adult in the room. We are the professional. Our instinct is to panic because something has gone wrong. It's going to be fine. I've never had a situation we couldn't deal with. It will work out, so stay calm. My number one tip for lawyers and mediators going into an online mediation, it is really important to create a written document that educates and informs your clients prior to going online, right? So something, and I mentioned it earlier in the question that Phoebe asked me, but I have an online mediation guidelines and ground rules. It's like 4 pages long. It's mostly this information that you've seen in this presentation, all in a writing that goes out to everyone ahead of time. I make them read it. I make them sign it. I go over it with them in the first mediation, and I hit the highlights at the beginning of every mediation session. You want to do the prep ahead of time. Preparation is key. I do have a lot of Zoom demo videos on my website. I just want to make you aware I don't have, in this short a time, have the time to show them to you. But for things like breakout rooms, for using the whiteboard in a mediation, for the toolbar components that are helpful in a mediation, you can go to my website for free videos. I also have a podcast, the Learn to Mediate Online podcast. It's on all major podcast outlets and on the website. And every week I bring on either a nationally or internationally known person who does online mediation or dispute resolution, or give you a tip from my own practice about how to make it helpful. So that available for more questions, Phoebe, if there are any more. I know we're running close to the end of time, but I want to make sure if there's some questions, I can answer them.
We do have questions. So thank you very much. So our first one is, what can you do to help if one of the parties isn't as knowledgeable about technology and is reluctant to mediate online?
So that's that onboarding session that I do with people, and I do that in two different ways. If they are represented by counsel, it really becomes their counsel's obligation or, duty to onboard their clients. And I will tell you out there, if you are going to be an attorney or an advocate to a participant in mediation, make sure you onboard your client, because you are putting them at a great disadvantage in the process if you don't do that. The unconscious bias that can be created in an online mediation proceeding is actually quite great. Think about being on an online video conference where someone continually is forgetting to mute themselves or unmute themselves, where they have poor video quality or a bad internet connection. We get irritated with them. And that is human nature, but think about that as the unconscious bias aspect in the room. Do not disadvantage yourself or your client by failing to prepare them.
Okay, that's really good advice. Thank you. We have another interesting question. So this one's kind of unique.
Okay, great.
So if someone wanted to develop a software specifically for online mediation, which features would you include based on your experience? Do you think there's a lack of features with the usual platforms out there?
So going to the four I highlighted: CREC, Legal or Modron, and Resolve Disputes Online, RDO. I do think that they have done a good job of it. So one thing you may want to do is take a look at them. I've been actually working with the founders of all four of those companies to give them advice based on what I hear from my practitioners. But I would say, the obvious ones that I talked about: you need the waiting room, you need the whiteboard, you need the share screen, you need the breakout rooms, a doorbell or a knocking function on the breakout rooms before, a mediator is not just going to in person go fling open the door and walk into a caucus room. In the same way, online, we need a way to let them know we're coming. E-signatures and the ability to create documents within the platform, really important. That's something that we do. Getting the pay function built into the program, into the platform, instead of having to have a whole separate platform. Have scheduling in the platform, so we don't have to have Calendly or something like that. The case management, and a lot of them, the four I've talked about, do that, but I don't know of one that has them all.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully we have some software developers listening in the audience.
Reach out to me, Susan at learntomediateonline.com. I'm happy to talk to you. I really feel that this is an area that is wide open, and dispute resolution online is here to stay. So this is definitely, I'd love to see more people get into that field.
Okay, wonderful. I think we have time for one more question.
Certainly.
You mentioned the ground rules that you like to use. No interrupting is, I think you said, was the most important one. Could you tell us some of the others? Are there any which are perhaps more important in online mediation than in general face-to-face mediation?
It really goes back to the preparation. Everything that we just talked about in this presentation is a clause in my online guidelines and ground rules. So if you were to look at this presentation and jot down each slide, you would be able to build out my guidelines and ground rules. That's how I created this presentation. I think what's really important for people to understand, because we're so used to flipping on our video cameras these days and having meetings, is that if you're doing an online mediation or dispute resolution, you have to be private. You have to keep it confidential. You can't have your family in the background making sandwiches and your kids watching television in the room right next door. It has to be a private and confidential proceeding. That is a hallmark of online dispute resolution, or of dispute resolution. So really, it's the preparation beforehand that's most important. But the guidelines and ground rules make that clear. And also, just, I don't think most people are being disrespectful of the process or trying to subvert the process when they have other people around, I think they just don't think about it. So it's our job to make sure they do ahead of time.
Okay, thank you, Susan. That's really helpful. Did you have any more slides?
Just the slide with my contact information, I think, was there. Let me just go back to the slides. I think yes, just the next, yeah, there we go. So this is my contact information and my website. The one thing I always tell everyone that I present to is that, I'm very passionate about helping practitioners get online. Please feel free to reach out to me with questions. That is my email. I try to answer every single email that I get, and I love to hear your questions. It lets me know what you need to know. I also love to hear your experiences, a good experience, a bad experience with an online mediation, because it helps me inform the profession. And I'm lucky enough to be able to be considered, at the forefront. I want to continue to bring helpful content to everyone. So please reach out.
Thank you, Susan. That's very generous of you. I'm sure many of our viewers will contact you after this event with their questions or comments. This has been a very informative session, and we're lucky to have had you here. So I would like to just remind everyone to please fill out the feedback form, say something nice, perhaps.
We'd appreciate it.
Yeah, we'd appreciate it. And later you will receive your certificates from joining this event. So thank you again, Susan. It's been really informative, filled with knowledge. And I'm sure that everyone has learned a lot from your experience. So yeah, thank you, everyone. And we will end the event now.
Thank you, Phoebe. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Mediate Guru. I love what you're doing.
Thank you. We're very grateful to have had you. Yes.